What is a pinwheel? We get that question a lot. What are they used for? How do you make them? We're going to show you that right now. I'm going to start with this roll of 400 grit Maverick Abrasives 3-inch sandpaper. I'm going to cut it out in 10-inch strips, and we're going to assemble this pinwheel, and then we're going to go out and we're going to show you how to use them. I'm going to measure out to 10 inches. I'm going to start cutting my sandpaper sheets. I need 20 of these in order to make this pinwheel. There's going to be 10 on each side. We're going to make this a faster, easier process, and we're going to use the Maverick Abrasives cut to length die cutting machine to get these 10-inch pieces for our pinwheels done a whole lot faster. All right, so they're trusting me to run this machine. He's got it dialed in. He's got our measurements dialed in. They're trusting me to run it. I don't know, this is kind of sketchy. We'll see here.
On the other side.
This is cool, y'all. This is good times. That was pretty cool. We've got all of our sheets cut now. Now we're going to go over to the mechanics table and we're going to assemble this pinwheel. Hang on. Now we've got our hole set, so now we can start fanning these out. Most people are not going to have a drill press in their shop, so you're going to have to do this on your drill in a vise, or you're going to have to clamp them together. It's really not a big deal. We just went ahead and decided to use the equipment that we had available to us. We're going to make a 400 grit pinwheel, and we're going to test it out on this. This is really just to show you how aggressive pinwheels are and how to use them. If you get something that's got a lot of buildup or heavily pitted or damaged, you may need to drop down a grit. You can make these out of anything at 180 grit, 320 grit, but we're using 400 grit today because that's what we cut. All right, so we've got our paper cut, we've got our flanges set, we've got an extension, we've got our test subject. We've already wiped it down with some APC. This thing's pretty nasty on the inside here. It's really pitted. So we're gonna show you how these pinwheels are, how aggressive they are at removing material and knocking it down to a smooth surface so you can get to polishing. So to make the pinwheels, you're gonna, basically the idea is this. You've got 10 pieces of sandpaper here, all fanned out. Then we're gonna put another 10 pieces on top the opposite direction. So you've got sandpaper on the bottom, sandpaper on the top. So I'm putting on the first 10 pieces with the abrasive side down. The next 10 pieces, gonna put the abrasive side up. That's essentially what a pinwheel is. So the first set is down. We've got it fanned out. Looks like that. That's how it's supposed to look. We've got our pinwheel made, we've got the shaft extension, we've got our tallow grease. This is important. You have to have this. We are not going to be using the flat surface. We're only going to be using the edge. This is where you really need to have your PPE. Mask, goggles, earplugs. This is a demonstration, so this is how we're going to do it today, just to show you the effectiveness of it. This is a super aggressive technique. This is for heavy material removal only. So if you really need to dig down into your wheel or a tank or things like that, cast aluminum is where we typically use pinwheels the most. That's going to be your biggest time saver on cast aluminum. Turbo housings, intake manifolds, superchargers, things like that. If you're doing, you really want to learn how to use a pinwheel. So for those of you who are going to ask, why use this instead of a rotary or a DA? Because this is going to dig deeper than both of those. This is going to get the metal down to almost as bare bones possible as you can get. Now you can come back over this and clean this up with your rotary or DA, but if you've got something that's really nasty, really pitted, and you want to get that out, this is going to be your biggest time saver and one of your best friends. How do you decide what grit to use? We made a 400 grit pinwheel just to show you the effectiveness and how to build them. We used it on this wheel, and it actually reduced the material, reduced the pitting, and it got out the milling lines. So sometimes you may want to go with a lower grit. It just depends on how damaged or how scarred up your surface is. I typically, if it's cast aluminum and you really want to dig deep on the cast aluminum, definitely recommend maybe a 320 grit or even a 220 grit pinwheel. Don't want to go much further than that. These things are super aggressive, so you really don't need the real low grits like 180 or 120. Most of the time, 220 and up will cut out pretty much all of your cast or all of the damage that you're trying to fix. How much pressure do you need? As with anything that we do in metal polishing or metal finishing, you need enough pressure to keep the material on the part. And that's about it. You just want to stabilize it. You don't need a whole lot of downward pressure. This is going to dig pretty deep. If you put more pressure on it, it's going to bend this in and then it's going to stop cutting. So same way with your metal polishing buffs, with your airways buffs and your compound bars. The more pressure you put is not always a good thing. You let the buff and the compound do the work, let the pinwheel and the tallow grease do the work. Depending on the condition and depending on the part that I'm working on, I'll typically start with a 320 grit pinwheel or a 400 grit like we've been using today. After that, you don't really need to go much higher because you've already removed a lot of material. You want to go right to your DA prep or even your rotary prep. So we've made this pinwheel using Maverick Abrasive's industrial 3-inch sandpaper rolls out of 400 grit. They have plenty of grits to choose from. The folks at Renegade have helped me out by die cutting the individual sheets for me, which made the process a little faster. I'll use this until it's just about above that safety flange. These things will go a long way. If you put them together properly, you tighten them down, keep your pressure right, this paper is actually going to last a long time. It's not shredding, it's cutting good, and we're getting a good surface out of it that's going to prep out nicely. The best paper for the best results. Maverick Abrasives.